what would be the best advice you would give to people on the fence of whether to do the DNA? Because there's people going, let me think, I might want to do it.
My thing is do it. It'll change your life because I could have written myself off. I just had anxiety, lifelong anxiety. My son just has a tic disorder. But you know what? We were able to really granular with him, changed his life. We did it with me, changed my life.
Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, Epigenetic Human Performance Coach. This is where we discuss all things lifestyle, environment, food, exercise, work, mind, and social interaction as they pertain to epigenetic expression in a way that's relatable to everyone. So if you're ready to start viewing you as an individual, take control of your life and health, and get results, buckle up, here we go. Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, and this is the place where we talk about everything lifestyle and related and how it relates to our genetic expression. I am so excited today. Buckle up, people. I have a guest with me, and she is another queen of epigenetics and DNA. And I haven't had anybody to jam on DNA on this program yet. So I'm super excited to get into this today. So we're going to be talking about advancements in epigenetic research. We're going to talk about the basics of epigenetics. So everybody's back on track again. I've all talked about it, how our lifestyle and environment affect how our DNA expresses, hence my podcast, Everyday Epigenetics. But we're going to talk about that. And then my guest also has expertise and information in working with tic disorders and ADHD, which I was just telling her, I can't concentrate, I must have ADHD. Do you really have ADHD? Is that just how you're created, or where could that be coming from? So I think you're going to find it a really fascinating conversation. And she works with families. So listen up if you have kiddos. I've been doing more towards that because we all know that what happens in childhood can really affect exactly what happens in the adulthood genetically. My guest today is Dr. Piper Gibson of Elite Gene Labs. She is the founder of the Tic Disorder Institute, Regenerating Health, and Elite Gene Labs, where she empowers families and healthcare professionals to address tic disorders and optimize wellness. She's a doctor of functional medicine, advanced holistic nutrition, and a board-certified doctor of natural medicine. Dr. Gibson helps individuals address the root cause of their symptoms through functional lab testing, nutrition, and genetic insights. She is also the author of Tic Talk: Common Misconceptions, Natural Approaches, and Real Conversations About Tic Disorders. So welcome to the program, Piper.
Thank you, Susan. I'm super excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, I was just so happy when I saw your bio when I looked at having you on the program. I was like, oh, this is awesome. Because we can talk on this forever. I always talk, whether it's my podcast or I'm on someone else's, that epigenetics is how our lifestyle and environment create how or affect how our genes actually express. Because our genes don't change, but the expression changes all the time. It's choice. It's the environment with which we surround ourselves. All these things in our environment. And so I'd love to hear, what's your take on epigenetics?
Yeah, so really that is it in a nutshell, is really how our environment is impacting our genes. So epigenetics is the study of how genes is influenced by environmental factors. And we know that our genes can be turned on and off by diet, stress, toxins, a lifestyle. So a lot of people they hear about genes and they think when they hear about genes that what it is set in stone. So I call those, oh my gosh, I'm going to die genes. These genes that send people into a panic. They're like, I'm going to die. I have this. I'm like, no, because we could influence the way that your genes work by changing your outside environmental factors, diet, toxins, all of that.
Yes. Every decision matters. That's what I tell people. When you're at the crossroads of, do I want to have that alcoholic drink? Do I want to have that ribeye steak that's riddled with fat? Some people can, some people can't. When you know what your propensities are towards handling that, you tend to make that better decision. Do I want to dial that crappy gene up or do I want to turn that baby down?
Exactly, exactly, and that's the truth. That's really how I look at it.
Yeah, and like you said, people have kind of the oh crap moments of, oh, I'm going to get Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
I've talked about it plenty of times on here. I'm a 3/4, an ApoE3/4, so I'm the increased risk. And then you hear, which again, we've all talked about Chris Hemsworth. He's a 4/4, the highest risk. I need to step back from acting to spend time with my family because I'm going to get Alzheimer's. It's like the panic that sets in with people. I'm going to have a heart attack. I'm going to have a stroke. If you keep up the lifestyle you're living, there's a good chance that's going to happen. However,
Absolutely.
however, and this is where people like you and I come in. Let me start with this. So, the ways that our genetics can help us better understand chronic conditions. I see a lot of autoimmune,
Mhm.
specifically around thyroid. I'm celiac, and typically you have one autoimmune, you probably have another. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yes.
And talk a bit more about that. And you had mentioned also in your the info that you had sent me neurodevelopmental conditions, things like that. So I'd love to hear you talk a bit on that, on how our genetics can help us better understand these areas as well.
Yeah, so you have there's so many schools of thought, but there's people out there who will say you don't need genetic testing if you just change your epigenetic factors. So change your environment and it will change how your genes express. However, what I have found in practice is that we are using genomic testing as a roadmap. So we are able to look at those genes and really help people to dial in and understand how their environment is impacting their genes. And in that instance, it's like the lights come on. Oh, the angels sing. Oh,
Exactly. Yeah, the heavens
they
open.
say, oh, I see now if I change this factor in my environment, it's going to impact how my genes work. So it really, all in all, makes them so much more compliant and understanding of those changes they need to make in their environment.
Yeah. Understanding themselves.
Yes.
Like you just said, when people say you don't need the DNA testing, you don't need genomic testing, just change your environment. But how do you know if you're changing it the right way for you?
Exactly, and
Because then you're just doing the generics again.
yeah, and I'm a prime example of that. So I had lifelong anxiety, just horrible anxiety. My son got sick and we did some genomic testing on him and it changed his life. And so I was like, I'm going to test me. So I had almost died doing a vegan diet one time because I was just so sick. I had no energy. And I really eat a lot of red meat at this point in my life. And so when I did my genomic testing, I was able to look at my B12 metabolism and see that I could eat red meat till I'm blue in the face, but I'm probably not going to be able to absorb that. So I always have to consistently take a B12 supplement, sublingual,
Yeah.
to be able to absorb. So I wouldn't have known that. Yes, I could have changed my environment, but I wouldn't have known that specific thing had I not had the genetic testing.
Mhm. Yeah, and when it comes down to the DNA testing, if you don't have somebody go over it with you to see what's actually expressing at the time, it's just plain information. So
Absolutely.
you'll see some reports, and I've seen a lot of them, where they just say, "Here's exactly what you need to do," just based on those genetic SNPs instead of, "What are you experiencing? Is this even happening?" People freak out about MTHFR. Is it imp right? Like, methylation is everything. So we'll
But it's
test
not.
your 5 genes. We'll
Yeah,
test
it's
5
just
genes and tell you exactly everything that's wrong just with the 5 genes around methylation. Did you just go
yes.
brain
We are
freeze?
on the same page. Absolutely. I agree with you. I call MTHFR the hot, sexy gene because everybody knows it. However, they don't know enough about it to be able to really understand it.
Yeah, and it's not just that one, there's so many other
Exactly.
things, and you can look at the methylation panel on a DNA, but what about everything else?
Mhm.
Right, because it's a complex system, and these things all play together. The methylation is a piece in your puzzle of inflammation, detoxification, brain health, immune system. So are other things like are you a secretor, the FUT2? Is that one of
I'm a
the
non
things?
I'm a non-secretor FUT too.
You're a non-secretor.
I'm a non-secretor. Yeah. I
Oh,
have a
that's
lot of
interesting.
non-secretors. Yeah, I'm a non-secretor, and I have a lot of TCN1, TCN2, GIF,
Yeah.
gas factor variants that I just I need all of them.
Wow. Uh, so for people that don't have no clue what I just said, or that have hyper related to me, the FUT2 genes, this has to do a secretor or non-secretor around B12. And the non-secretor tends to not have as good a gut microbiome, but they tend to absorb B12 better. Oh, that's right. So you would be a non you would the non-secretor tends to absorb B12 better. So you are a secretor. Yeah, so am I. So I don't tend to absorb it either.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't absorb it, but I think so much of it is the factor that I have so many of the other genomic, like the
other
MT,
issues.
MTRR, like all the delivery pieces are
Yeah.
broken.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And when you understand what those pieces are that are broken and we know how to put them back together, that's why I say I tell this to clients, we're going to put Humpty back together again, right? Sometimes it's just these little pieces of this puzzle that are missing that we just don't know.
Yeah.
But when you look at all of it, instead of just 5 snips to say, this is everything that's wrong with you. And why is it something? It's not something's wrong with you. It's just, this is what's expressing, this is what's happening with you. And here's how we can make it better.
Yeah.
So we're definitely on the same page here. So talk a bit about the genetics as far as ADHD and tic disorder. And I am completely at your mercy with tics. I know the only tick I know is I've had Lyme disease. I haven't seen a tick on me. That's about all I know about ticks. But I really don't know anything about the physical tics that
Yep.
someone experiences. So I'd love for you to educate us because I'm sure somebody knows somebody that suffers from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So most people are familiar with Tourette's, and it's actually portrayed very poorly on TV because not everybody is cussing and saying all the naughty words. That's really actually a rare form. Tic disorders, Tourette's is a form of tic disorder. So what happens with a tic disorder, it's really considered just an uncontrollable body movement. And you have two forms. One can be a motor, meaning they're blinking or clapping their hands or
Mhm.
jerking their neck. That's a motor tic. Or they have a vocal tic where they're maybe making a word sound or a bird sound or clearing their throat sound. And
Mhm.
so what happens with tic disorders is once you've had multiple tics, vocal and motor, for over a year, they will diagnose you with Tourette syndrome. But what we look at from the conventional standpoint is that we are told over and over when it comes to tic disorders, there's nothing you can do about it. Just ignore it. They'll grow out of it. If tics become too severe, they try to band aid approach symptoms with medications that are for things like blood pressure. And
Wow.
yeah, and we know from studies, Cincinnati Children's Hospital flat out tells us medications prescribed for tics will not cure tics, and rarely do they reduce symptoms more than 50%. So tics will still be obvious to other people. So you have all of these people who are really grasping and struggling to help with these tics, and conventional medicine says there's nothing you can do about it. When my son was diagnosed with a tic disorder 13 years ago, I went down the rabbit hole to figure out how to help him. I was not about to just write him off. It just wasn't going to do it. So I went back to school. I relearned everything I knew about health and wellness. And so I really started, when we saw huge changes with him, I started focusing on these kids. We know that with Tourette's, there is a potential genetic connection. They don't know if it's one gene or multiple genes. However, when we look at the epigenetic factors and we look at some of the genomic factors, we can start to alter the environment to help calm that down. So I really approach it from every single child that we're working with as an individual. So we're looking at functional lab testing like stool pathogens and food sensitivities, but we're also looking at the genomics. And so when we start to look at that, one, we want to look at what is their predisposition to chronic aggressive inflammation, because we've seen recent studies that say, hey, tic disorders are really related to an unbalanced immune system. So, what's wrong with their immune system? So, we start to look at the genetics for inflammation. So, we're looking at these on and off switches for inflammation. And it makes a difference for really anybody. This is where I'm starting as those inflammation genes, is
Yeah,
because it's going to matter in autoimmune disease. It's going to matter
absolutely.
when we're looking at things like ADHD. We also look at a lot of neurotransmitter genes. So, things like GAD1, for example, how well you're converting that glutamic acid to GABA, how well you are moving along the dopamine and serotonin with a COMT or an MAOA and an
Yep.
MAOB. So we're really looking at all those factors. And yes, we do have to consider methylation in the ADHD standpoint, any standpoint really, because
Yeah.
those methylation factors are going to feed our neurotransmitter production as well. Of course, we have to make sure we have plenty of protein in there too. So we're really
What are you doing what are you doing inflammation gene snips? Are you doing like IL-6, TNF?
uh-huh. IL-6, TNF, CTLA-4,
Okay.
um, we're looking at IL-13, IL-5. So really looking at those on and off switches. And I really explain it like this. You put lighter fluid on a fire, it goes whoosh. It gets really aggressive. And so I'm like, if you have these broken on switches, you're more likely to have that aggressive response. You're going to have this whoosh. Your kid gets sick. You get exposed to something, you're eating something, you're stressed, whatever the case may be. The problem really starts to come in is when we have those broken off switches, CTLA-4, or we have a tumor necrosis factor, TNF, that's really going to upregulate
TNF, yeah.
inflammation. So we really start to look at all of those things and lay out like, what are these changes that these families need to make in order to give their kids optimal health?
Love it. I love it. And I love that you work with families because it isn't necessary when you have kids, it's not just the child. This whole family is affected by this and this environment.
Yeah.
So you can't just tailor it for one person. It's everybody's going to be affected by it as well. And what kind of what kind of changes are you seeing
Really?
when you bring the genetics into this and really like you said, it's really looking at this person as an individual. I'll have people ask me all the time for recommend. Well, what do you recommend for this food? What should I do for this? And I go, you know, I don't know. I don't have your information, and I just hesitate to give generic information because we are also very different. So when you do dial somebody in, but now this is you work with families, but are you also working with adults here? If someone came to you as an adult saying, "I've got this tic disorder, help me, Piper."
Yes. Yeah, I do see a lot of adults, and I'll tell you what happens is the same thing that happened to me is they get their kids tested, they see huge changes in their kids, and then mom and dad are like, "Do me, do me." So yes, I we work with adults as well. I find that adults, though, are a lot of them stuck in their ways, so they're harder to get them to make changes, whereas parents are, like, all in, they just wanna help their child.
Yeah. And it's gonna be a little bit easier because they're doing it for the children. The children have a bit of a they're gonna have a bit of a voice. They're human, but when the parents really can come in and help take over, is there anything that you impart into somebody that is an adult to get them to see the importance of this
Yeah, we do
in
share a
ways?
lot of, like, our own personal stories about how things have changed. We really embrace that testimonial piece so that people can see, here's the changes. But I also find that giving them like, "Okay, you know what? I know that it's hard. It is hard to make changes. But one, you have to choose your hard. Do you wanna struggle and still be sick? Or do you wanna learn to make these changes and over time they become second nature?" So we really tell them like, "Hey, let's make it a goal to have 90 days of doing XYZ, whatever we're doing." So it makes
Mhm.
it a little bit more easy for them so that when they get to 60 days and they're feeling amazing, they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna keep going."
Keep it going.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of the times people just feel so rotten to begin with. They just don't feel good and they're frustrated. And especially if they've been adults, they've been living with this for a while. And this is their norm. Even though they're not happy with it and they don't like it and they feel like crap, it's still their norm. It's what they know. And the thought of having to make a change, and for some, the thought of changing a routine that they've developed, that creates so much stress around them.
It really
So,
does.
yeah, I love that just make the goals. And I don't know how often you see people, but I'll start with people like every 2 weeks to just set the small ones so that when they start getting wins, like you said, as they get a win, then they want to keep going because it's good. Otherwise, that frustration that kicks in can really, really bury them back into the quicksand, down into the sink back.
Yeah, and we have health coaches on our team, and we do those check-ins every couple of weeks, especially at first, because we wanna make sure that parents are staying on track. And they get so overwhelmed, and so many people are down the rabbit hole, and so a lot of times I'm like, "Get off the internet and just follow the recommendations because you will get there, but if you keep going down the internet and you keep asking me these questions, you're gonna feel like you're living in a tornado, so stop."
Yeah. Yeah. You get the emails. literally panic emails that I couldn't sleep last night because I went down the Dr. Google rabbit hole. Like, don't please, when you're working with me, the one thing I ask you is work with me, not Dr. Google. Dr. Google would have saved you long ago. Or in different, you go into different Facebook groups that'll be around that certain topic. I used to see it a lot of the time with Lyme disease. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to get out of that group. Lyme disease or autoimmune. And people are just going off of their experience, but they have no idea what that other person's dealing with. They have no idea what that other person's body is like. So you can't be taking all this advice from people that are not actually trained to understand you on that individual level. And that's where we differ.
Yeah. And it's really a hard point to get across. And I feel like so many people on the Facebook group note, they get into these groups because they want support. They feel alone and they feel lost.
Alone.
Get into these groups and it's trauma bonding. And so it's just, oh, this worked for Bob Jones, so I'm going to try it. And then they're frustrated because it didn't work for them. And so there's so much trauma behind it. I really feel like a lot of times those Facebook groups make it worse and not better. Yes, I
Yeah.
have one, but we really try to monitor that traumatic bonding experience and say, yeah, we're not going to do that in here just because it makes it harder for people to get better.
Yeah, it does. It keeps you in that victim mentality a lot of the
Mhm.
time. I noticed that I had a podcast I did last year with Kate King. She's one of my favorites. I've had her on 3 times now. She's fantastic, and she deals with epigenetics and trauma. And in our first conversation last year about epigenetics and trauma, we talked about the trauma bonding and how it's actually people think it's like, oh my gosh, you're my soul sister, or my soul brother. Like I get you, but how it really keeps you in that victim mentality. It's not a healthy way to bond, and you do see that it really keeps people where they are. When you can lift someone out of that by seeing them as an individual, there's your difference because they realize it's just me instead of comparing to everybody else because they'll look at people on these pages and go, why am I not where they are? Because you are you. And maybe you're going to take a bit longer. And that's okay. That's it. Not everybody is like performance, optimal performance, rush out of the gate, tell me what I need to do, like I am.
Yeah.
And they worry, are you going to coach me like that? I know how to work. I get the difference with people. I say, no, we will go low and slow with you, right, at your pace. And they just having someone understand that part about them, being that individual,
Yeah.
right? It's a whole game changer. So what are you seeing as some of the most promising advancements that are coming out as far as epigenetics and the different chronic diseases we're seeing?
Yeah, there's some really cool things on the horizon. A lot of people have probably at this point heard of CRISPR. CRISPR is like taking that tiny pair of scissors to your DNA. Scientists use it to cut up bad parts of the genes and add good parts. There has been some unsuccessful studies. There was a volunteer he volunteered for CRISPR to have his cholesterol genes done, and he did not make it after that. I think there's so much work in the gene editing piece, but there's things like next generation sequencing. It's a super fast way for us to read genetics and it's super cheap. And so there's a lot of, I won't say a lot, but there's several companies that are up and coming that are going to be using this next gen sequencing. There's use of artificial intelligence. Of course, we're using it everywhere, but we're also
That's what I'm using. Yeah.
we're using it in genomics to really look at somebody's individual genes and come up with a plan or whatever so much faster. There's even things like single gene genomics where we're really able to zoom in really closely on that single gene and look at that impact. So I think that there's so many really cool, exciting things on the horizon. And we just got to see what's going to be that next big up and comer. I think it's really going to be the next gen sequencing just because it's not too far off base from what we're currently doing.
Look how far we've come just in the last several years, where
Yeah.
really the be all end all was 23andMe.
Hmm.
And I'm getting ready to do just a podcast on my own at how not all DNA reports are created equally
Thank you. Thank you.
because they're
Yes,
not.
they
And
are
I don't care if
not.
it's a company like 23andMe, and this is what I tell people because I said, "What if I just do the 23andMe? It's cheaper." Right? And I go, "Okay, first of all, that's ancestry based. And if I actually were to run 23andMe data through my array, it's missing so many different things because they are focused on your ancestry.
Yeah.
And I have to laugh at some of the things that come up. You may have a fear of public speaking. Yeah, okay, so do most of the people. I saw one where you have a more of a propensity to like raspberries. Okay, do I really care? I
Right.
wanna know, how do I process saturated fats if I'm thinking about doing a keto diet? How
Right.
do I process if I'm gonna go vegetarian or vegan? How am I with the ABCG8 genes, like the anti-vegetarian genes? Am I more prone to plant sterols building up in my blood? Yeah, I wanna know these things, not am I gonna smile at the person walking by me or growl?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I tell people that, and they're like, "I have 23andMe," and I'm like, "I don't wanna look at your 12,000 pages of raw data. I love you, but no thank you. Let's really get specific and look at those things that are important." Because when we're looking at genetic data, there is not scientific evidence on each and every gene. There are on
Uh,
some genes, but if we're running the whole genome, we don't need data on XYZ gene if there's no science behind it. So I'm really looking at that science based backed information to really help people come up with that plan. So I love that you're doing that episode because I totally agree.
yeah, and I will mention also that in 5 SNPs, we test hundreds of thousands and then come up with almost 600 or so that we put on there that we can work with or that we've done the research on, that there's real research. Because if you look at some of those, and I won't mention any names, but you look at some of those that are just those very few,
Mhm.
there's a SNP on there that we looked at, and there's actually like no research on it. So my lab's is basically a junk gene.
Mhm.
And so we did a mock-up of that on our report. We could run that same thing. And I tell people, but I won't. I could run that report for you, but why would I? And I think you're of the same philosophy. If I'm going to do your genetics and help you to make the best plan moving forward to help you achieve your optimal lifestyle, understand where your more increased risks are, where your lower ones are, and we want to keep them lower. Why would I only choose 5 things? Why would I not want to understand everything to have that quality of life?
Yeah, agree. We are definitely on the same page and
Yeah.
I I think that in this day and age, you've got Google, you've got AI. There's so much information out there that people, one, don't know what's right and what's wrong, and there's so many places on Google that there's misinformation that's just really not complete, and so I think that having somebody like yourself or like me who really is able to lay it out and say, "This is what we're looking at and this is how it is," really, one, is gonna help them be more compliant, but it really helps them to be like, "Oh, I have a roadmap. I did this to my 17-year-old son on Saturday. We came home from the wrestling meet, and I said, 'Hold on, let me look at these genes,' and we had a whole genetics lesson." So, yeah, we're still using those genetic reports to this day because we're like, "Oh, how can we help your athletic performance? Let me pull out these genes."
Yep. I refer back to mine. I did mine in 2019. That's when I got into doing the DNA portion of it. And I still go back. It was just a couple of years ago when I realized, like, I was so stinking tired, and I've talked about it on here. I was so exhausted, and my thyroid was jacked up, and my practitioner kept telling me, we're gonna give you more. Take more." I was doing T4, and then I went to the Armor, just keep upping it. And the more I upped it, the more tired I got. And we couldn't figure this out. And then when I looked at my DNA, I'm like, why am I not looking at my DNA? I was listening to a podcast and she was talking about D101. And I'm like, I know I've had D101. Why don't I look? I have variants in both of them.
Mhm.
And in both of the D101 genes, both homozygous in both, I don't convert.
Yeah,
So the
you don't care.
more I'm doing that T4, the less I wanted to get out of bed. And then frustrated. But the crazy thing, and this is, I'm sure there's other practitioners out there because I'm a coach. I'm not a practitioner, but I've worked with other practitioners. And then there's those that go, I took her my DNA. I said, look at this. You have to look at this. This is what's happening. She said, I don't care. I'm not giving you T3. I'm not giving you T3 only. And I said, so it's okay if I don't want to get out of bed, if I'm losing my hair, like in droves. It's okay. Yep. I won't give you any more than 5 micrograms a day. It was mind blowing that she was more concerned about having her little God complex than to opening up that, you know what, genetics is something that can be actually super helpful. Why would you not want to bring it in? It's not taking away from you, it's helping you. You've seen it, how it helps you in your practice. And I think when you said people, when they read online, they're getting wrong information right there when they start calling your the MTHFR mutation. It's variants. People, there's 2% of actual genetic mutations out there. You can't, it's just a variant off the norm. So a lot of these articles, they aren't even talking in the proper terms. Right? So it's, but you're going to get all your information off there. And experts with the lifestyle things, they're not looking at that individual and how that lifestyle change could affect somebody positive and then the next person negatively. You put the person with the MAOA variant on a with the high protein or a CONT. You give me high protein and I'm an AA. I don't, this brain does not shut off. And I couldn't figure out why is my brain still not wanting to stop with sleep. So I actually lowered my protein intake at night
Oh, that's a good idea.
and went for, and I was like, wow, my brain is calm. But you give me something like you talked about for the glutamate,
Yeah, the GAD1 gene.
the GAD1 genes. Okay. So we know childhood trauma nixes those GAD1 genes, severely affects them. I've had that, and I have the genetics for low activity in the GAD1. So you get me around anything that's natural flavors, the glutamate, any of that. Like my brain, maltodextrin in a supplement before bed.
Yeah.
I'm literally like that. I'm that sensitive to it. And then you see people that will tell that I've been told, well, go ahead and take this at bedtime. And I'm like, you don't understand. If you and they go, "Oh, it's just your genetics." But to understand and stand up for yourself and say, "This is something I can't do. I can't do a high protein meal at night because it literally gets my catechol going, and I am, like, banging off the wall." Or like, barbecue. So then I've got barbecue beef, which I love, right? Give me a good beef brisket,
Right.
but the glutamate in there, can't sleep. I will only do it at lunch because I can't sleep.
You can't sleep. Yeah.
And it's just I think it's just the genetics gives us a peace of mind. Now, one of the things I will talk about on the podcast I'm gonna do why it's not all created equally, those is where DNA is beneficial, but it has its limitations too. And people expect DNA to tell them, this is exactly the foods you should eat, and this is the time you should eat. It's not that precise. And this is where you have to have that human component come in
Yes.
with your practitioner, your coaches to help work with you on that.
There's some really cool genetic tests out there, and one of them is a test where we can really get really specific with your genetics and your diet. But we're always telling the providers that we're teaching the test too is you have to have this human component and be able to explain to them like we don't have the science exactly to say based on your genetics you need this specific amount of fats, carbs, proteins. We don't have it cannot be that exact. But we can start to change these factors around it. And so I really feel like I don't care how good you get with AI. I feel like when it comes to the genetics, you have to have this human component to be able to break it down for people
Absolutely.
to understand it.
Absolutely. And people, the AI, the other platform I use is AI based. Like I said, looks at how you're formed in the womb, predominant hormones that drive you, 15 layers of science in there. It's amazing. And so when someone says to me, I want to know exactly what I should eat and exactly what time, I'm like, then that's not the DNA. But if you want to know what your propensities are, say you, especially you have people in your family that have had Alzheimer's, heart attacks. You want to know why you're not sleeping. Let's look and dial this in and see the genetic component where this is coming from. The beauty is we have so many different areas, but when you are doing all AI and you don't have that human component, people feel like a number.
Yeah.
And where we come in as a practitioner understanding this and as coaches that understand this, and you see an individual as the individual and how they're created and not a number, not just another patient on the tick mark. Okay, how many people am I seeing today? Okay, they're in and out like regular doctors do, in and out the door, and trying to do test after test after test when a lot of times, like, just going through a DNA test can give you, let's take a look at this is likely what's causing this.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's just such a time saver. Genetics, so this year is going to be 6 years, so I don't know where the time has gone. 6 years for me doing epigenetics. And when I started and I was a basic health coach, went to IIN, I was doing my minimum program was 12 coaching sessions over 6 months because it was so much guesswork.
Mhm.
I don't know. Let's try this. Let's try this. And I was all paleo because why not? It worked for me. And that's the other thing you get into with people going down the rabbit hole of listening to every podcast with all the specific experts, whether they're longevity, fitness, health. They'll give the things that work for them and some of the research, but it's still none of that takes into account that specific person and where they are at this time and what their genetics have them lined up for. And so they go down these holes. Well, I read this book while I'm working with you. Okay, please don't even read that book right now. I just want to focus on what we're doing. Then you can go down that if you want to take it that further. But you see them on tons of the different supplements that if my guess, and you can tell me this, but we seem to be on the same page here. When you go through someone's DNA, you end up getting them off a lot of the crap that they don't even know why they're on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have people that come to us with a pharmacy of supplements, and we sit down and we're like, get rid of that and get rid of that and get rid of that. This is really more specifically what you need. And so, yeah, there was a study that came out in 2023 about the best diets for kids on the spectrum. And it was like 13 different diets. Julie Matthews did this amazing study. And what she found is the best diets for tic disorders, which I had been doing in practice for years, was a paleo diet, followed by gluten-free, dairy-free, low sugar, followed by food sensitivity diet. So in my practice, just naturally, what I've been doing is a combination of the three. And they don't stay on that diet forever, but we're doing it as this first big approach to really starting to reduce inflammation. So it's really looking at that individual and then piecing it all together is what really makes the process that we do very unique.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. So are you seeing people just there that when you see results with a tick, does it go completely away? Does it go to where it's barely noticeable? Are there certain triggers to ticks like stress and where fill us in a bit more on the ticks because
Yeah.
I'm super interested in this
Yeah.
because I just don't understand it.
So I look at ticks as it's your body's check engine light. So if your car's check engine light comes on, you're going to take it to the mechanic and they're going to tell you, hey, what's going on under the hood? Your tick is the same thing. I'm telling you, your kid has this warning, dude, something is happening. Let's figure it out. I have found through the years that I think triggers are very, very individualized. Like I have some that just super sensitive to blue lights. They have to wear their glasses when they're working and really monitor the screen time. My own son, he knows at this point, he's 19. Well, if I cheat on gluten, it's just going to send me through the roof. So,
Wow.
a lot of kids, what happens is we get them tick free and then they become teenagers and they start doing things and they really start to realize what those triggers are for them. And then they, of course, back it back out. Yeah, I do think triggers are very individualized. Gluten, dairy, sugar, very impactful. Inflammation, very impactful. But when we can look at the genetics for inflammation, we can say, okay, you guys are going to have to follow a low inflammatory lifestyle for life because these are your genes. But still doesn't mean you can't go out and have fun. It's just you can go to Disneyland, just don't eat gluten and dairy or whatever the case may be.
I found interesting because I started looking more into the inflammation genes so, for myself and for some other clients, specifically the IL-6 and the TNF. They're all over my reports. And what I found so interesting because you see people start to get into the exercise routines and then they start to feel better.
Mhm.
And some of them that are so maybe so like dopamine driven. Now I need more. I need more. I need more. and they get into the endurance and the long, and then you start to see some
Yes.
more issues and how over 2 hours, these will be released normally and in a healthy way with exercise, and it's good. But it's excessive exercise where I was reading in the research, like over 2 hours of regular exercise at a time, chronically increases the inflammation in the bad way
Yeah.
for these people. So you wonder why you start to see the issues with overtraining. You don't sleep as well. You start to ache and they just they think about maybe I'm just training too hard. But you are, but you're turning up these inflammation genes that are down the road going to cause more issues. And I couldn't play I even have a if you saw my sea of Post-its here, where I have all these different snips with stuff on here that I look at and just keep looking at going, "Really?" It's just chronic stress. And it doesn't surprise me that we're seeing so many kids. I had no idea about kids with tic disorders. I don't recall seeing this. Now I'm 59 and I don't know how old you are, but back in my day, we went outside and played. We didn't have the stress.
Mhm. We didn't
The
exercise our
stress, the
thumbs.
mindless.
Yeah.
No, we went outside and we played. And when the street lights came on, it was dinner time, you went home. But until then, you're out there being a kid. Kids are being thrust into adulthood. Look at all even the sexual stuff they're putting out there. Just it's like kids are growing up since toddlers. They're I see kids on cell phones playing. I'm going, I was probably still with my pacifier at that age, and they're blowing me away.
Yeah.
All of these things, but the stress that these kids are under, and you wonder why there's so much inflammation. I don't know if you're familiar with True Diagnostics, the epigenetic age testing.
Yep. Mhm.
So I did it. I did interpretations for them for about a year and a half,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, it was fascinating. And one of the things that I've talked about it so many times on here is people my age, I would see generally aging about normal, about the same, or a lot of times a little bit better because we started to realize that we need to make some changes. But the young people, I was looking at people's reports in their 20s, early 20s through mid 20s, early 30s that were aging 9 years older, 11 years older. When you would think, how is this happening? And I think stress is a major component, environmental, drugs, alcohol, and all of this is what has been touted in the culture.
Yeah.
And
It
so
has. And you have to think about when it comes to the kids, the environment that they learn in is so much different. They're all sitting in front of these computer screens all day long as well. We were humans, you're meant to be outside in the sunshine doing the things outside. And so their environment has changed so drastically, but you also have to look at the way that we use screens for that dopamine hit, and it changes their breathing patterns. So we see a lot of kids who have tics where they are breathing funny because they're watching these screens and every 3 seconds there's something that's, "Oh, it's exciting. Oh, it's
oh,
exciting."
wow, so that's altering the breathing.
It starts to alter their breathing. Same thing in adults. The time span for the dopamine hits for adults are a little bit longer, like 10 to 20 seconds, where the little kids are like 3 to 5 seconds, but it's altering their breathing as well. So you're altering the light, you're altering the breathing. There that's just that's not how humans were designed. And so it's really hard to get parents to understand, yes, we need the screens because they got to go to school and learn, and that's part of the curriculum these days. But they cannot immediately come home, sit on their butts, and exercise their thumbs because you're going to get more chronic inflammation that way for sure. You're not getting the vitamin D, you're not getting the circadian rhythm balanced, you're not getting all of these things when you're sitting inside all day on a screen.
I love the best clients when I see them on Facebook, like, I'll have a post up and then I get a notification and I'm getting ready to get into bed and turn off all my notifications everything when I go to bed, and then something will pop in right before I do that or as I'm doing it, and it might be 11 midnight at their time, and they're commenting. I'll get on and go, "Why are you commenting? Why are you not asleep? Get off
Yeah,
your
go to
phone.
bed.
They're like, I have my best friend, I would do that to her, and she's, "Oh, you're my mother?" And I go, "Yeah, and your mother's telling you get off the damn phone." Like, put it
I do
away.
the same thing. I'm like, "What are you doing at 3 AM? Stop texting me at 3 AM because I'm not awake."
People don't realize that timestamps are on these things, you
Yes,
guys.
I'm
We
like,
look at them and we see.
we know what you're doing, people."
We're watching. We're watching you. We've got our eyes on you. It
Yeah.
makes a difference. The alcohol, I've talked about that. I actually have a podcast coming up that I did last week on addiction. Alcohol is just such a huge part of the social norms and how that you talk about affecting the brain, let alone everything else. I mean, God, but and then the sleep.
Yeah.
How many people do you see that have issues with sleep? The
Tons,
majority?
tons of people, and yes, there's that genetic component, but there's also that epigenetic environment component that to me is probably more significant than the genetic piece because they're all night long scrolling on their phones. And yeah, I definitely deal with a lot of people who can't sleep. And when you have kids who can't sleep and then you have parents who can't sleep, it's a really poisonous combination.
Oh boy, I wouldn't want to be in that environment.
It's rough.
That would be like going into a den of pit vipers in the pit, everybody going after each other because I'm sorry, but people aren't happy
Yeah,
and nice when they're not sleeping.
absolutely.
And I'm
Absolutely.
one of them. I don't
Oh,
get
I
sleep.
count me in. Me too.
And was it under for every 2 hours of sleep, regular sleep that you miss, I think it starts at this 2 hours. It's the equivalent of having had two alcoholic drinks. And I've had that where I've had a horrible night of sleep and you wake up and it's I haven't drank in 5 years, but I can certainly remember what it was like to be a little bit, woo, bouncing off a wall.
Yeah.
Going, I feel loaded. It is not a good feeling to
Yeah.
just be that off according to sleep. And then it increases as you keep losing. And the life expectancy of someone under 6 hours of sleep chronically, that of someone that's a smoker or chronic heart disease.
Yeah. I saw that
Yes.
study.
Crazy. But people say, I'm fine with 5 hours. You're
Mhm.
really, there's a very minute amount of population that is,
Yeah.
but it's probably not that person. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I love that you're part of making us healthy again. Yeah, there's just so many of us banding together going, make these things available, make us the norm instead of big pharma the norm.
Yes.
Come to us. Help you when you give the body what it needs. Mind, body, food, environment, when you tailor the environment to that person instead of us trying to fit where we don't fit, that's where we see health start to blossom.
Yeah.
And I think this is the big benefit of working with someone like you, someone like me, that we get it. And when you give the body these things, it has an amazing capacity to turn itself around. And as you're saying, you work with children, never too early, and it sure as hell is never too late.
I agree, and honestly, I tell parents all the time, I think it's better to start them early. We have some clients, their kids too, and they are really hesitant to like, the kid doesn't sleep. I'm like, we're looking at the genes, we're looking at the food sensitivities. The kid has dairy issues. This dairy needs to come out. And they're very, very hesitant. And we've explained it. And I'm like, do you want to sleep? Let's do, give it 2 weeks. Let's just see where we can get. But it's really, looking at that the whole impact of how what we're doing to our bodies is impacting the way that we rest, the way that we sleep, the way that we function. And it really takes a lot of lifestyle change education, I think, for so many people.
Absolutely. And that's I think where we're educators in that area.
Yeah.
It's not me telling someone this is exactly what you need to do. It's educating so that they can make the choices. And I
Right.
love when they have the epiphanies when you meet for a session or you meet with them with your appointments and they come in and go, "Oh, God, I noticed when I did this, I felt great. And then I went off the other night or I went into a different environment and I just felt it. I knew it to my core. Or I felt this. I had a relapse of this symptom. And I realized that it's not worth it. And that's when we get Heavens open up and go, "You get it. Now you get it." It wasn't I could sit and tell you till I'm blue in the face, but when you sit and experience these things, there's the gold. And the awareness. It's so much of what we do is just creating awareness that people did not have before. I am aware that I have an increased risk about Alzheimer's. So I'm very aware of the glycemic index of foods I eat. I'm very aware that I stopped drinking. I'm very aware of I need to keep exercising, which is never an issue for me. But again, just that awareness that you create around these things that people get so routine and they're so used to living in these stress levels that are way up here that all of these things that are unhealthy, they're the norm. So they don't know any different. So it's
Yeah.
really not their fault that they're not a bad person and they're not stupid. Like they'll say, I've been so stupid. No, you just didn't know.
No, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite sayings. So again, we are on the same page.
We are. I have a really good friend and colleague. Her name is Dr. Brandy Cummings, and she told me we were having this conversation, and she said the way I explain it is think of it like you're on an airplane, and I am your co-pilot, and you are the pilot, and you are flying the plane. And I am there if you need me to. We start going down, and you need my help. But I said, I'm going to educate you, and you're going to fly this plane. And so I love that analogy because it really helps my clients to understand, like, we're teaching you, we're going to give you all of these tools, but you are the one that's in
You're
charge
doing
of
it.
making it and sticking to it. Yeah.
Yep. Even when they say to me, thank you so much. You did this for me. I'm like, no, I've been your support.
Yeah. You did it.
You've done it. You're the one doing it. I'm
You're,
not, and tell them in the beginning, I'm not going to do this for you. You're going to put the work in. Then we'll do the work at your pace, but I am going to put you out of your comfort zone because that's why you are where you are. Staying and doing the same thing and getting nowhere or getting worse or going down the rabbit holes. What would be the best advice you would give to people that are thinking about dabbling in this?
dabbling in doing the testing or getting tested for
Yep.
themselves.
Thinking about whether on the fence of whether to do the DNA because there's people going, I think, well, let me think of it. I might want to do it. I got to think about it because it's not cheap.
It's
I'm
not,
not cheap.
I'm not cheap either. But my thing is do it. It'll change your life because I could have written myself off. I just had anxiety, lifelong anxiety. My son just has a tic disorder. But you know what? We were able to really granular with him, changed his life. We did it with me, changed my life. We've now done my sister and my mom and my nephew. And like, it will change your life. And it gives you this incredible roadmap that you can take with you and you can pull out 5 years later and be like, oh, okay, what do I have to do? I have a client who they live in Australia and had a tic disorder. Mom said a year ago when we started that he couldn't run a mile to save his life. She was like, if a saber-toothed tiger was chasing him, he'd be dead. He was a couch potato. But we did all of this work. And so not only is he tick free, but now he's winning state track meets
Wow.
because we have really been able to apply the genetics, apply the diet, change his environment. So now he is an exceptional athlete. And so we're seeing just incredible changes in these kids. We like to say they get to take center stage in their life because they've missed out on so much that now it's like it just starts to fall in place for them.
I love it. It's bringing out it's the human performance. That's why I say I'm an epigenetic human performance coach. And people think when I first started talking about it, they're like, oh, I don't need to perform. You need to perform in everyday life. It's about you as a human performing to your potential. And we all have there's potential in every one of us. I say we all have some crappy stuff and we all have some good stuff. When you know what's what and you really just see the potential that you have, it just opens up a whole realm of possibilities in life, in all areas of life. And I think my advice would be to, like you said, you never look back and go, I wish I never would have done DNA testing. I wish I never would have worked with genetics. It's never in all my years of doing it, I've never once had someone say that. It's always been, God, I wish, like I say, I wish we would have had this as kids.
Yeah.
No, game change. But I would say stop going down your Google rabbit holes. Stop listening to every single quote expert out there because they don't know you. Work with somebody that, especially if you've got the ADHD, you have the tics. Get a hold of Piper. This is your expert in that situation that will look you as the individual with that condition. You are not a condition. When I first found the DNA, it was a group that I got certified through, and the chief medical officer, he was talking, and I said, I have Lyme disease. And he goes, and I'm like, what do you mean so? This is causing everything. This is a huge part of me. I was so angry. Everything was Lyme. Everything was Lyme when I got diagnosed. And he said, we don't care about that. We're going to look at what does your body need to be optimal. And I was like, that was a slap in the face. And I thought, what an asshole. And then as I thought about it, I was like, thank you for telling me that, because I stayed in that victim mode, looking for other victims to comrade with, like you had said, that it kept me in that mode. And once I started looking at it, well, what do I need to be optimal?
Yeah.
The line might be there, it might go away. Who knows? But it is a different way of looking at things. Like when you keep looking at what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong, you find what's wrong. When you look
Right.
at the potential of what can be right, it's uplifting. It's just
Yeah.
completely uplifting. So reach out to people like us that do what we do, that see you as the individual, not as something that you have, but who you are and how we can pull out the best of your potential based on how you are created.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
This has been such a fun conversation.
Yeah, it was
Now,
great.
if people want to work with you through the Elite Gene Labs, through your Tic Center, the Tic Disorder Center, tell us all the ways, and this will all be in all the show notes, people, so you'll be able to find everything in our show notes, but go ahead and tell us how they can reach out to Dr. Piper Gibson.
Yeah. So you can find me on the web at www.regenerating.health. We offer a free initial consult for anyone who's interested in working us with their child's tic disorders, ADHD, anxiety, OCD, all of that stuff. At Elite Gene Labs, if you're really more interested in looking at your genetics, it's elitegenelabs.com. We actually have created a practitioner training program. So that will be coming out in April. We'll be training other providers who are interested in learning how to use specialty genomics in practice. So we are doing that as well. And then you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Regenerating Health.
Love it. Thank you for being a part of our revolution moving forward, because I think I thought about this when I found genetics 6 years ago. It was at the Paleo FX conference, and I was between
Woo!
the functional health, functional
Diagnostic
FDN,
nutrition. Yes.
functional
And I'm also
diagnostics.
an FDN.
Okay, so I was
I bet we met each other there because I was at that same Paleo FX conference 6 years ago at the
we
FDN
may
booth.
have. We probably did talk, because I was between there and Apiron was the DNA, and they were around the other corner.
Mhm.
So I was for 3 days back and forth between the two. And I was literally like, what am I going to do? And then I was at the Apiron booth, and one of their coaches was there. And I said, look, I was a cop. I'm a health coach. I'm not going to understand this. And he's like, I was a city planner. I go, okay, then maybe I don't need a background in genetics or health to do this. And he showed me a sample, and it had to do with the GAD1 genes. And it,
Uh-huh.
like, where this woman said that I can't touch any of these things. Now her genetics lined up fine with it. And he said, have you had childhood trauma? And she said, yeah, a lot of it. And he said, that's what switched these genes off. And I was like, all right, dude, I perked up and I said, no one else is doing this. This is like the wave of the future. And everybody was over at the FDN table. And so I just never looked back. And now I have other I have friends that are FDN, and I love to partner up because you guys do tests that are not my forte, but I'm all about. I do 3 different types of genetics, so I work with that 3 different ways, and that's what nobody else is doing. I love to have those conversations with those of us that are like this, that come from different areas, because you see people are so worried about competition, but when we actually collaborate and talk about it, we have so much more in common where we can learn from each other. It's not a competition. We're just trying to get the word out. And that's why I was so excited to have you on here and get this word out. And what you do is so specialized with the tics and the ADHD. I don't think there's anybody that really, or very few people that know that this is available. And they need to understand that this stuff is available out there and how to find you, because you're providing something that's so unique. And I love it. And thank you for doing that. And it
Yeah,
all stemmed from what happened with you. This is all how we all end up like where we are, right? Because we
I was a fashion designer before my son got sick. And that's yeah. And then I went back to school to relearn everything. And so I have taken that combination of using the functional lab testing like FDN and the genetic testing and the naturopath approach and just put it all together.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just grateful to be a part of this journey, to have people like you come into my path and be so like-minded around wanting to help people just be their best selves according to who they are.
Yeah,
So different.
absolutely.
So reach out to Dr. Piper Gibson. She gave you everywhere. We're going to have it all in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me today. What a fabulous conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. Everybody, get out there, make it an amazing day, and be your most authentic selves. Please share this with anybody that you think this could help. Lots of great information here. Have a great day. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who'd find the information useful. Please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it'll help the information get out to others. If you're interested in seeing if we're a great fit to work together, the link is in the show notes below, where you can sign up for a free consultation with me. So go make it a great day and let your authentic self shine.